Elena Martinez had always believed that life's greatest adventures ended somewhere around 45. At 55, she had resigned herself to the gentle predictability of her days, working part-time at Between the Lines, Astoria's beloved independent bookstore, tending to her small cottage garden, and twice weekly making her pilgrimage to the lake. The morning ritual never varied. She would slip into her black wetsuit, now slightly loose around the waist, a reminder of her changing body, and pack her weathered canvas tote with a thermos of chamomile tea and a towel that had seen better days. Her 15-year-old Honda Civic knew the route by heart, winding through Astoria's tree-lined streets toward the recreation center that sat like a jewel beside the pristine lake. 8 years. 8 years since Daniel's funeral, since the last time she'd felt truly alive, rather than simply existing. The lake had become her therapist, her confidant, her escape from a world that seemed increasingly focused on youth and tomorrow's promises, rather than today's quiet moments. This particular Tuesday morning carried the crisp bite of early autumn. The maples lining the parking lot had begun their transformation, painting the world in shades of amber and gold. Elena pulled her kayak from the roof rack with practiced efficiency, her movements economical and sure. She'd done this so many times she could manage it blindfolded. The water welcomed her like an old friend, cool and embracing. She pushed off from the weathered dock, her paddle cutting through the mirror-smooth surface with barely a sound. Out here, time moved differently. The rest of the world, with its bills and expectations and subtle reminders that women her age were supposed to fade gracefully into the background, simply melted away. She was halfway across the lake when she first noticed him. Liam O'Connor had taken the job at Astoria Lake Recreation Center because he needed work, not because he was passionate about teaching teenagers how to not tip their kayaks. At 28, he was still figuring out what he wanted to be when he grew up, a question that seemed to haunt his generation more than any before it. He'd moved to Oregon from Colorado after his engagement imploded spectacularly 6 months earlier. Sarah had wanted a traditional life, marriage by 30, kids by 32, a house in the suburbs with a white picket fence and a golden retriever. Liam had panicked at the timeline. The way their relationship had begun to feel more like a business arrangement than a love story. "You're afraid of commitment," Sarah had accused during their final fight. "I'm afraid of committing to the wrong life," he'd replied. And that had been the end of it. Now, standing knee-deep in lake water while trying to convince a group of surly 15-year-olds that kayaking was actually pretty cool, guys, he wondered if he'd made a mistake. The teenagers were more interested in their phones than paddling techniques, and his supervisor, Jerry, seemed to view him as a temporary inconvenience.
"Remember, low-angle strokes," he called out to the group, demonstrating the proper technique. "Feel the water. Don't fight it." That's when he noticed her. The woman in the black wetsuit gliding across the far end of the lake with a grace that made his breath catch. She moved like she was born on the water, each stroke efficient and purposeful, her kayak cutting through the surface without so much as a ripple of disturbance. "Mr. O'Connor? Mr. O'Connor!" He snapped back to attention as one of his students, a girl with pink hair and an attitude, waved her paddle in the air. "I'm literally sinking here." The rest of the lesson passed in a blur of rescued teenagers and equipment management, but his eyes kept drifting back to the woman on the water. She paddled with the kind of meditative focus he'd only seen in master craftsmen, completely absorbed in the rhythm of her movement. By the time she returned to shore, his class was packing up. He watched her approach the dock, noting the way she handled her kayak, lifting it from the water with surprising strength, carrying it with the casual competence of someone who'd done this thousands of times.
She was older than him, probably in her 50s, with dark hair streaked with silver and laugh lines around her eyes. Beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with youth and everything to do with the kind of confidence that came from surviving life's storms. Their eyes met briefly as she passed the equipment shed where he was stacking paddles. She offered a small, polite smile, the kind strangers exchange, and he found himself responding with a nod and a "hey there" that sounded more enthusiastic than he'd intended. She paused, seeming almost surprised by his greeting, then smiled more genuinely. "Good morning. Beautiful day for it." Her voice was warm with the slight hoarseness of someone who'd lived fully. Before he could think of a response, she was walking toward the parking lot, her kayak balanced effortlessly on her shoulder. Liam stood there holding a paddle, watching her load her kayak onto an aging Civic with the practiced efficiency of a pit crew member. Something about the encounter left him unsettled in a way he couldn't quite name. 3 days later, Elena found herself lingering after her paddle, taking unusual care to rinse her kayak and organize her gear. She told herself she was simply being thorough, but the truth was she'd been thinking about the young instructor, his easy smile, the genuine enthusiasm in his voice when he'd greeted her. When was the last time a man had looked at her with anything other than polite indifference? When had someone last seemed genuinely pleased to see her? The morning class was finishing up, and she could see him in the shallows, helping a boy who'd managed to get tangled in his paddle leash. The instructor's patience was remarkable. She'd watched him work with the teenagers all week, never losing his temper despite their collective attention spans that seemed measured in nanoseconds. As the students dispersed, chattering and laughing their way back to the center, Elena made a decision that surprised her. Instead of packing up and leaving as usual, she approached the equipment area where he was organizing the returned gear. "Excuse me," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "You're the new instructor, aren't you?" He looked up from the paddles he was arranging, and she was struck again by his eyes, green like the deep part of the lake, with gold flecks that caught the morning light. "That's me," he said, straightening. "I'm Liam, and you're the woman with the perfect stroke technique." Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Oh, I just paddled to relax. Nothing fancy." "Don't sell yourself short," Liam said, leaning against the equipment rack. "I've been watching you out there. You move like you were born on the water. How long have you been kayaking?" The question was simple enough, but there was something in his tone, genuine interest, not just polite conversation, that made Elena's heart skip. When was the last time someone had asked her about herself with such focused attention? "About 8 years. I started after—" She paused, the familiar weight of grief settling in her chest. "After my husband died. I needed something that would get me out of the house, but also give me space to think." "I'm sorry for your loss," Liam said, and the words carried real sympathy, not the hollow platitudes she'd grown accustomed to. "The water has a way of healing, doesn't it? When I moved here from Colorado, I was pretty messed up about some stuff. Being on the lake every day, it's helped." They fell into easy conversation then, trading stories about the relationships with water. Liam told her about growing up on the Columbia River, how his father had taught him to read currents and respect the power of moving water. Elena shared memories of family vacations at the coast, how she'd always felt more at home near water than anywhere else. "You should consider joining one of our advanced sessions," Liam said as they talked. "Not that you need instruction, but there's something to be said for paddling with others who appreciate the sport." Elena laughed, a sound that felt rusty from disuse. "At my age, I think I'll stick to solo adventures." "Age is just a number," Liam said, with such casual conviction that Elena almost believed him. "I've taught people in their 70s who paddle circles around 20-year-olds. It's about passion, not youth." As Elena drove home that morning, Liam's words echoed in her mind. "Age is just a number." When had she started thinking of herself as too old for new experiences? When had she begun to fade into the background of her own life?
But conversation changed something fundamental between them. What had been polite nods and brief hellos evolved into genuine exchanges that both Elena and Liam found themselves anticipating. Elena began timing her arrivals to coincide with the end of Liam's morning classes, finding excuses to linger, checking her equipment twice, organizing her gear with unnecessary precision, volunteering to help stack kayaks even though it wasn't required. Liam, meanwhile, found his attention drifting throughout his lessons, watching for Elena's familiar figure on the water. He began to recognize her rhythm, the way she held her paddle, the particular route she preferred around the lake's perimeter. Their conversations grew longer and more personal. Elena learned that Liam had studied environmental science in college, but wasn't sure what to do with his degree. He'd taken the instructor job as a temporary measure while he figured out his next move.
"I thought I had it all planned out," he told her one morning as they sat on a bench overlooking the lake. The October air was crisp, painting their breath in small clouds as they talked. College, career, marriage, kids, the whole timeline. But when it came time to actually walk down that path, I realized it wasn't mine. It was just what everyone expected. Expectations can be a prison, Elena agreed, thinking of her own life, how she'd followed the prescribed route of marriage and motherhood, career and caregiving, only to find herself at 55 with no idea who she really was beneath all those roles. "What about you?" Liam asked. "Did you always work at the bookstore?" Elena shook her head. "I was a social worker for 25 years. Child services. It was intense. After Daniel died, I couldn't handle other people's trauma anymore. I had enough of my own to process." She told him about those dark months after the funeral when getting out of bed felt like an unsurmountable task, how a well-meaning friend had suggested she tried kayaking as therapy, and how she initially resisted the idea.
"I thought it was ridiculous," she admitted. "A middle-aged woman learning to paddle around a lake like some kind of summer camp counselor. But Daniel had always said I gave up too easily on things that might bring me joy." "Sounds like he was a wise man," Liam said softly. "He was. He would have liked you, I think. He believed people were put in our paths for a reason." The comment hung between them, loaded with implications neither was quite ready to examine. But something in the air shifted that day, a recognition that their connection went beyond casual friendship. Eliana noticed it in the way Liam's eyes lingered on her face when she spoke, the way he leaned slightly forward as if afraid to miss a single word. She felt it in her own response to his presence, a quickening of her pulse that she hadn't experienced in years, a warmth that had nothing to do with the October sun. The transformation happened gradually, then all at once. Their morning conversations became the highlight of both their days. Elena found herself choosing her clothes more carefully on lake days, selecting the sweater that brought out her eyes or the jacket that made her waist look smaller. Liam started arriving at work earlier, telling himself it was to prepare for classes, but knowing it was really to catch those precious moments with Elena. The first intentional touch came on a gray Thursday morning in late October. Elena was struggling with her kayak rack. The clips were stiff with cold, and her fingers weren't cooperating. Liam appeared at her side without being asked, his hands covering hers as he helped work the mechanism free. The contact was brief, practical, innocent, but the spark that shot through Elena's entire body was anything but innocent. She looked up to find Liam staring at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Thank you," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper.
"Any time," he replied, but he didn't step away. Neither did she. They stood there in the morning mist, hands still touching on the kayak rack, something electric passing between them. Elena felt simultaneously like a teenager experiencing her first crush and a woman awakening from a long sleep. "Elena," Liam said, his voice rough with something she didn't dare name. Whatever he was going to say was interrupted by a group of early bird paddlers arriving for the day's first rental session. The spell broke and they stepped apart, but the air between them remained charged. Elena spent that entire paddle thinking about the warmth of Liam's hands over hers, the way he'd looked at her like she was the only person in the world. It was impossible, impractical, probably inappropriate given their age difference, but her body didn't care about logic. It cared about the fact that for the first time in 8 years, she felt desired. The kiss happened 3 weeks later, on an evening when the lake was empty, except for the two of them. Elena had stayed late, claiming she wanted to practice a new stroke technique, but really she'd been hoping for time alone with Liam. The October air was thick with mist, creating an intimate cocoon around the deserted recreation center. Liam had finished cleaning the equipment and was about to lock up when he found Elena still by the water's edge, her kayak pulled up on the small beach. "Practicing in the dark?" he asked, approaching with the easy smile that never failed to make her heart race. "Just thinking," she admitted. "Sometimes the lake is the only place that makes sense." They walked along the shoreline in comfortable silence, their footsteps muffled by the sandy beach. The mist swirled around them like a living thing, creating the illusion that they were the only two people left in the world. "Elena," Liam said suddenly, stopping and turning to face her. "I need to tell you something." She turned toward him, her heart hammering against her ribs. In the dim light, his face was all shadows and angles, but his eyes held a fire that made her knees weak. "I think about you constantly," he said, the words tumbling out like he'd been holding them back for too long. "During lessons, at home, when I'm trying to sleep. I know this is crazy. I know there are 100 reasons why this is a bad idea, but I can't stop thinking about you." Elena felt the world tilt on its axis. Every rational thought in her head screamed at her to step back, to maintain appropriate boundaries, to remember that she was old enough to be his mother. But her heart had other ideas. "Liam," she whispered, his name a prayer on her lips. "I think about you too. More than I should. More than I have any right to." He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne mixed with the clean scent of lake water and autumn air. His hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone with reverent gentleness. "Is this insane?" he asked, his voice barely audible above the lapping of waves against the shore. "Completely," she admitted, but she didn't pull away. When their lips met, it was with the hunger of people who had been starving without realizing it. Elena's arms came up around his neck, her fingers tangling in his hair as she pressed closer to his warmth. Liam's hands span her waist, pulling her against him like she was an anchor in a storm. The kiss deepened, becoming something desperate and claiming. Elena felt 25 again, felt beautiful and desired and vibrantly alive. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his chest and tried to process what had just happened. "I should go," she said, but made no move to leave his arms. "Should you?" Liam asked, his hands still resting on her waist. "Or should you stay and help me figure out what this means?" Elena looked up at him, at this beautiful young man who looked at her like she hung the moon, and made a decision that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "Help me understand," she said. "Help me understand how this is possible." Their relationship bloomed in stolen moments and hidden glances. They became masters of discretion. Casual conversations that carried layers of meaning, accidental touches that set their skin on fire, meetings that looked coincidental but were carefully orchestrated. The changing room became their sanctuary. After hours, when the center was empty and the parking lot deserted, they would meet in the dim space between the lockers, their kisses desperate with the knowledge that discovery was always possible. "You're so beautiful," Liam would whisper against her skin, his hands mapping the geography of her body with worshipful attention. Elena had never felt beautiful in her wetsuit and no makeup, her hair damp with lake water and her skin showing every one of her 55 years. But in Liam's arms, under his adoring gaze, she felt like a goddess. Their physical relationship was a revelation for both of them. Elena had expected her body to feel foreign after so many years of solitude, but with Liam, she felt graceful and responsive. His touch awakened nerve endings she'd forgotten existed, reminding her that desire didn't die with youth. It evolved, deepened, became richer with experience. For Liam, Elena's responsiveness was intoxicating. The women he'd been with before had been tentative, self-conscious, worried about how they looked or sounded. Elena met his passion with her own, unashamed of her pleasure, generous with her affection. She knew what she wanted and wasn't afraid to ask for it. "I love the way you touch me," she told him one evening as they lay tangled together on a blanket in the equipment storage room, their skin still flushed from lovemaking. "Like I'm precious." "You are precious," he replied, tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "You're the most amazing woman I've ever known." Winter brought new challenges. The lake was too cold for comfortable paddling, so they had to find other excuses to meet. Elena would come to the center on the pretense of checking rental schedules or asking about spring programs. Liam would text her from work, casual messages that looked innocent but carried deeper meaning. "Thinking about paddle techniques. Could use your expertise. New equipment came in. Want to see if it's up to your standards. Miss our morning conversations." Elena would read these messages at the bookstore, her cheeks warming as she decoded their true meaning. Her coworkers began commenting on her improved mood, the spring in her step, the way she hummed while shelving books. "You're glowing these days," said Margaret, the store owner, during Elena's shift one December afternoon. "New vitamins?" "Something like that," Elena replied, thinking of Liam's hands on her skin the night before, the way he'd whispered her name like a prayer. The first real test of their relationship came just before Christmas, when Liam's sister Kate announced she was driving up from Sacramento for a surprise visit. "She's staying for a week," Liam told Elena during one of their clandestine meetings. They were in his small apartment above the bait shop on the town's outskirts, a space that had become their primary refuge as the weather grew colder. "She wants to meet my friends, see how I'm settling in." Elena felt a familiar knot of anxiety in her stomach. The secret nature of their relationship hadn't bothered her when it was just the two of them, but the thought of meeting Liam's family, of having to pretend they were just casual acquaintances, filled her with dread. "Maybe I shouldn't be around that week," she suggested, curled against his chest in his narrow bed. "Give you time to catch up without complications." "You're not a complication," Liam said fiercely, his arms tightening around her. "You're the best thing that's happened to me in years. I want Kate to meet you." "As what?" Elena asked quietly. "Your friend from the lake? Your kayaking buddy?" The question hung between them, highlighting the impossible situation they'd created. They were lovers, partners, but they existed in a bubble that couldn't be easily explained to the outside world. "I'll figure it out," Liam promised. But Elena heard the uncertainty in his voice. Kate O'Connor was 26, blonde, and possessed the kind of effortless beauty that came from youth and good genes. She arrived at the lake on Elena's usual Tuesday morning, eager to see where her brother worked and meet the people in his new life. Elena watched from across the water as Liam introduced Kate to his coworkers, noting the easy affection between the siblings. When she returned to shore, Liam was helping Kate into a rental kayak for a quick tour of the lake. "Elena!" he called out, his voice carrying across the water. "Come meet my sister." Elena's heart hammered as she paddled over to where they waited. Kate's smile was warm and genuine, but her eyes were assessing in the way of younger women meeting potential threats. "So you were the famous Elena," Kate said as Elena approached their kayaks. "Liam's mentioned you. Says you're an incredible paddler." "He's very kind," Elena replied, hyper-aware of every word, every gesture. "I just enjoy being on the water." They spent an hour paddling together, Kate chattering about her job in marketing and her recent breakup, Liam making easy conversation, while Elena tried to project casual friendliness. But she caught Kate's speculative glances, the way the younger woman's eyes moved between Elena and her brother, clearly trying to puzzle out their dynamic. That evening, Liam called Elena in distress. "She knows?" he said without preamble. "I don't know how, but she knows something's going on between us." Elena's blood ran cold. "What did she say?" "She asked if I was sleeping with you. Point blank, over dinner. When I hesitated, she said she could see it in the way we looked at each other." "And what did you tell her?" There was a long pause. "I told her it was complicated." "Complicated," Elena repeated, the word sitting bitter on her tongue. "Is that what we are?" "Elena, don't. You know that's not what I meant." But the damage was done. The conversation brought into sharp focus all of Elena's insecurities about their relationship. The age gap, the secrecy, the inevitable judgment of others. When Liam tried to explain his sister's concerns that Elena might be taking advantage of him, that he was rebounding from his broken engagement, Elena felt something break inside her chest. "Maybe she's right," Elena said quietly. "Maybe this is all a mistake." "Don't say that," Liam pleaded. "Don't let my sister's narrow-mindedness destroy what we have." But Elena was already pulling away, protecting herself from the hurt she saw coming. "I need some time to think." She didn't answer his calls for 3 days. Elena spent those 3 days in a dark place she hadn't visited since the months after Daniel's death. She called in sick to work, ignored her phone, and sat in her kitchen staring at the lake through her window while questions circled like vultures in her mind. "What are you doing? You're old enough to be his mother. This will never work. You're embarrassing yourself. You're embarrassing him." On the 4th day, Liam appeared at her door. He looked terrible, unshaven, hollow-eyed, wearing the same clothes she'd last seen him in. When she opened the door, he stepped forward like he was going to pull her into his arms, then stopped himself. "We need to talk," he said. Elena let him in, acutely aware of her own appearance. No makeup, hair unwashed, wearing the ratty robe that had seen her through her worst days of grief. If he wanted to see her as she really was, a middle-aged woman falling apart, this was his chance. But instead of looking at her with disgust or pity, Liam's expression softened with tenderness. "Elena, my love, what have you been doing to yourself?" "Facing reality," she said, her voice hoarse from crying. "Your sister was right. This is ridiculous. I'm ridiculous. Stop." Liam's voice was sharp with pain. "Don't you dare reduce what we have to ridiculous. What we have is beautiful and real and worth fighting for." "Is it?" Elena challenged. "When your family thinks I'm some desperate cougar preying on their innocent son, when everyone who sees us together wonders what the hell you're doing with an old woman? Liam was quiet for a long moment, and Elena felt her heart begin to crack. Here it comes, she thought. The inevitable realization that I am not worth the hassle. You're right, he said, finally, and Elena felt the bottom drop out of her world, but then he continued. People will talk. My family has concerns. Some people will never understand us. But Elena, listen to me very carefully. I don't give a damn about any of that. He moved closer, his hands coming up to frame her face. I don't care if you're 55 or 75. I don't care if people think I'm crazy or you're cradle robbing or we're both having some kind of breakdown. I care about you. I care about the way you make me feel like the best version of myself. I care about your laugh and your wisdom and the way you turn everything into poetry when you talk about it.
Elena felt tears starting, but Liam wasn't finished. I care about the way you kiss me like you're drowning and I'm air. I care about how you challenge me to be better, to think deeper, to feel more fully. I care about building a life with you, whatever that looks like, however long we have. Liam! I told Kate to mind her own business, he continued. I told her that I'm a grown man capable of making my own decisions about who to love. And I told her that if she can't respect the woman I love, then she's not welcome in my life. Elena stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. You said that? I said that, and I meant it. His thumbs brushed away the tears on her cheeks. I can't promise this will be easy, Elena. I can't promise that people won't judge us, or that my family will come around immediately, or that society will embrace our love with open arms. But I can promise that I will fight for us every single day for as long as you'll have me. Elena felt something shift inside her chest, a wall she'd built around her heart beginning to crumble. Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure this is what you want? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Liam said, and sealed the promise with a kiss that tasted like redemption. Spring arrived with the drama of a grand revolution, transforming the lake from winter's stark beauty to a canvas of green and gold. Elena felt the season's renewal in her own heart as she and Liam made the decision to stop hiding their relationship. It started small, holding hands while walking to the equipment shed, sitting closer together during their post-paddle conversations, sharing lingering glances that they no longer tried to disguise. The lake's regular visitors began to notice, but the reactions were more curious than hostile. Good for you, said Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman who brought her grandchildren for swimming lessons. She'd cornered Elena by the parking lot one Tuesday morning. Life's too short to worry about what other people think. The comment gave Elena courage she didn't know she needed. The bigger test came when Elena's daughter Sarah called to announce she was driving up from San Francisco for a surprise weekend visit.
I haven't seen you since Christmas, Sarah said during their phone conversation. Mom, you sound so different lately. Happy. I want to know what's going on. Elena took a deep breath. At 28, Sarah was actually closer in age to Liam than to Elena, a fact that made the upcoming introduction feel surreal. There's someone I'd like you to meet. Someone who's become very important to me. The weekend of Sarah's visit, Elena invited Liam to dinner at her cottage. She spent hours preparing Daniel's famous pasta sauce recipe, fresh bread from the bakery, flowers from her garden arranged in the good vase. She wanted everything to be perfect, to show Sarah that this wasn't some impulsive fling, but something real and meaningful.
Liam arrived early, carrying a bouquet of wildflowers and wearing the blue button-down shirt that made his eyes look like deep water. He was nervous. Elena could see it in the set of his shoulders, the way he kept running his hand through his hair. "What if she hates me?" he asked as Elena arranged the flowers in a vase.
"She won't hate you," Elena assured him, though she wasn't entirely certain. Sarah had always been protective of her mother, especially after Daniel's death. The thought of Elena dating anyone would be an adjustment, let alone dating someone Sarah's own age. Sarah arrived just as the sun was setting, her travel bag slung over her shoulder and her lawyer's mask firmly in place. Elena could see her daughter cataloging details the moment she walked through the door. The extra place setting, the flowers, the general air of preparation that suggested this dinner was significant. When Elena introduced them, Sarah's expression went through a series of rapid changes. Surprise, calculation, and something that might have been approval. "So you're the mysterious lake person Mom has been mentioning," Sarah said, shaking Liam's hand with a firm grip. "Your mother is an incredible paddler. She's taught me as much as I've taught her." Dinner was less awkward than Elena had feared. Liam was charming without being overeager, asking thoughtful questions about Sarah's work and sharing stories about his own career path. Sarah, for her part, was more curious than hostile, though Elena caught her studying them both with the analytical eye of someone trained to read people. The moment of truth came during dessert, when Sarah excused herself to the bathroom and returned with the direct approach Elena remembered from her daughter's teenage years. "So," Sarah said, settling back in her chair with a look Elena recognized, "how long have you two been dating?" Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Sarah, about 6 months," Liam answered calmly, his hand finding Elena's under the table. "Your mother is an amazing woman." "She is," Sarah agreed, her gaze moving between them. "She's also my mother, and I love her very much. So I need to know that you're serious about this, that you're not just experimenting with an older woman." Liam finished when Sarah trailed off. His voice was steady, but Elena could feel the tension in his hand. "I understand your concern, Sarah. If I had a mother, I'd want someone looking out for her too." He turned to look at Elena, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. "I love your mother, not because she's older or younger or different from other women I've known, but because she's Elena. She's brilliant and brave and makes me want to be a better man. I can't promise I'll never hurt her. I think that's impossible in any relationship, but I can promise that I'll never stop trying to be worthy of her love." The kitchen fell silent except for the soft tick of the clock on the wall. Sarah studied them both for a long moment, then smiled, the first genuine smile she'd offered all evening. "Okay," she said simply. "Okay, I can work with that." Summer brought a freedom Elena hadn't expected. With their relationship acknowledged by the important people in their lives, she and Liam began to build something that looked remarkably like a normal life together. They developed routines, morning paddles together when Liam wasn't teaching, evening walks along Astoria's waterfront, lazy Sunday afternoons reading in Elena's garden while Liam graded papers for the environmental education program he'd started at a local elementary school. Elena loved watching him work with the children, seeing how naturally he connected with their curiosity about the natural world. He'd found his calling, she realized, not in traditional classroom teaching, but in hands-on environmental education that took kids out of their desks and into the world. "You should see their faces when they spot their first bald eagle," he told her one evening as they walked hand in hand through downtown Astoria. "It's like watching someone discover magic is real." "That's how I felt when I first saw you," Elena confessed, then blushed at her own boldness. Liam stopped walking and pulled her into his arms right there on the sidewalk, kissing her with a kind of passion that made passing tourists smile and shake their heads at young love, not realizing that Elena was older than some of their parents. The age gap still existed, of course.
There were cultural references Liam didn't understand, music from Elena's youth that predated his birth, life experiences that didn't translate across generational lines. But instead of creating distance, these differences became sources of discovery. Elena introduced Liam to the poetry of Mary Oliver, the music of Joni Mitchell, the particular pleasure of handwritten letters. Liam showed Elena how to use Instagram, though she never quite got the hang of hashtags, introduced her to podcasts, convinced her to try rock climbing at the local gym. I can't possibly, Elena protested when he first suggested, staring up at the imposing wall of colored holds. I'm 56 years old.